So we know just from, watching a lot of your stuff online too, that you guys are rooting for a girl. So how does that work when you're doing IVF treatments? Like how many embryos, like how is that process been for you, knowing that you would prefer a sex?
No, so I think that's funny. I think some of that has got spun through, the transfers that we have done and then the media, right? So I think the media is just like, oh, they're doing it just to have a girl. And I'm like, no, slow your roll. You missed the first other 3 sentences we talked about before that. So what had happened was during our first cycle, we had 8 embryos, but 3 of them were graded the highest. And one was Brexton, obviously. And then the other 2 were girls. And then you know how they can kind of look and be like, well, based on certain things, like we think this, and that. And so then the next one was a girl, but she wasn't as viable
right,
as the first 3. And then the other ones that were boys were kind of in that category of like, it could work. Like they look good, but not as good as the first 3. And so that's what had happened. We obviously transferred Brexton. And then sure. Yeah. We were like, okay, well, it kind of makes sense. A, I'd love to have a boy and a girl. B, the next 2 best ones are girls. And so we went down that path. And then on the 3rd one, we did the last girl one. And then, we talked to the doctors because we were like, hey, we do have 4 boys left. And they looked at them and they're like, look, if you're at a 25% chance with 2 uteruses, like that's not even national standard level right now. Like, that's not good. We don't think that these embryos are viable. They were like, if your surrogate had shown anything, right? They were like, but the fact that she's had 2 kids, she's a proven uterus, you're a proven uterus. And now between 2 uteruses, we've implanted 4 babies and we have 1. Like, that's not good.
Right.
And so then we decided to obviously go back to square one after talking with numerous doctors, ended up at CCRM in Denver. And yeah, I will say, I was like, okay, because, you obviously can't determine the sex, right? And I was like, they're all going to be boys. I can almost guarantee it. And my husband's like, why? I was like, because I love my son. I love racing. He loves his mommy so much. But it's funny, like we've always talked about a boy and a girl. Like I have a brother, yada, yada. And I'm like, there hasn't been anything that has gone like to plan. And I was like, it's so rare to get a lot of embryos and for them to be all one sex, And so it was just the joke that we're like boy, mom, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like came to terms with it. And so we go in and we, do the egg retrieval, they do the embryos, blah, blah, blah. And so the nurse calls and or the embryologist, I'm sorry. And she's like, hey, I just want to give you a report. So actually you had 5 day 5 high grade AB embryos. Like they look phenomenal. You have 4 other ones that look pretty good. And then you have 1 more that we couldn't get a read on. So we would have to retest. It wasn't a day 5. So it's kind of like, if you really want us to do it, but we suggest this, And then she was like, do you want to know the gender? And I was like, okay, sure. And I'm like, and she paused and she's like, well, this doesn't happen often. And I'm like, I look at my husband, I'm like, it's all boys, watch. It's all boys. Cause even my son is like, I want a baby sister, And she looks and she was like, well, I hope you want a girl because they're all girls. And so
oh, wow.
We just started laughing. And I just really felt like God was like, hey, I hear you. You know what I mean? And like I said, because some people are like, oh my gosh, well, what if they're all boys? I was like, then we would have had all boys. Like, what do you think? We were going to go through this again? Hell no. Like,
right.
But
gotcha.
We were excited, so that's how it went. But, for people who don't really understand the whole, genetic testing and this and that, we've had people that are like, well, you made them all girls. I'm like, okay, that's actually not possible. I had nothing to do with that. You know what I mean?
Took some Barbie glitter and then I combined it with some Oprah glitter and then I made a girl.
Yeah. So you know how that works. But so I do like to explain that because, we were honest, we did have 4. And so that's 4 more boys from that first one. And so that's why we spoke with our doctors, CCRM, a few other doctors, and we were like, what do you think? And they were like, it's just, you got to start over.